It's good to talk to everybody. I appreciate what you all do, and I'm looking forward to just hanging out for a few minutes and sharing some thoughts. Let me give you just this quick context. So I uh, grew up in Marietta, Georgia. I went to the University of Georgia, so hopefully we have at least some Bulldogs fans on here. I'm sure they got some Alabama fans and some Texas fans and all those. And I'm getting a thumbs down from Debbie. Man, that's brutal. Um, and when I graduated, was involved with a couple things, but about 12 years ago, had this idea that we could impact high school students' lives around the country. And as we looked at the landscape, there really felt like there were two options if we wanted to impact students. One option was to have a nonprofit or a ministry organization that needed to fundraise to be able to reach students, and the other was more of a camp type program that would require students to pay for the program. So we're either going to charge students and probably be limited on only reaching students from a certain socioeconomic level, or we were going to raise money and do it. And we just wanted to figure out how we could reach that entire audience all at once. And we learned at the time, being in Atlanta, that at that point, 80% of Chick-fil-A's frontline team members were under the age of 21. So 80% of them. Now that number is about 70%. So 240,000 team members, 70% under the age of 21. And we went and pitched them and we said, hey, it was like this cheesy PowerPoint presentation where we had a Chick-fil-A restaurant and an electrical plug into a high school. And we said, here's our belief. If we can plug you into high schools across the country, we can increase brand affinity. So it was a marketing play. We could increase your catering sales. So we thought you'd sell more Chick-fil-A biscuits and sandwiches in schools. And the third thing was we believed they could create a talent pipeline. So if you put your brand in the schools, you could hire more people. And so for Chick-fil-A, we ended up developing a program called Chick-fil-A Leader Academy. You can go to chick-fil-aleaderacademy.com. That program is now in about 1,200 high schools in 43 states. And it is one of Chick-fil-A's most effective tools to hire talent. And if you can imagine in the locations that a lot of us are, it certainly helps in the Southeast and in Texas and in the Midwest. But what Chick-fil-A has found it very valuable is in places like the Bay Area in California and Boston and Chicago and places where their brand is not as strong. Because of that work, we've done a lot of other things with Chick-fil-A. Last year, we helped redesign their corporate onboarding. So when they hire somebody at the corporate office, what does that experience look like? And so I am not a Chick-fil-A operator. I'm not a Chick-fil-A corporate employee, but about 50% of our company's business is with Chick-fil-A. And I've just gotten a front row seat to seeing an incredible organization and incredible people. And so as Kim asked me to do this, I just want to give you three concepts, three strategies that I have seen work really effectively at Chick-fil-A. And I think they have a ton of application, both for local associations and local churches. So let's unpack them. The first one that I want to share with you, and it has been so cool to see this work for Chick-fil-A, is Chick-fil-A values excellence over expedience. So excellence over expedience. Now, peek behind the curtain. I am a bivocational pastor. Our senior pastor at our church is about twice my age. And where he probably gets frustrated with me is sometimes when you're younger, you want to do everything and you want to do it in the next 2 weeks. You're going to change all these kind of things really fast. And I feel like young pastors struggle with this a lot. They want to do things with expedience, and sometimes they don't focus on doing them with excellence. And let me give you where this concept really came to life for Chick-fil-A, and I want to encourage you to use the chat function here. In the 1990s, Chick-fil-A had what they viewed as their most serious competitor. So who Chick-fil-A was most worried about. I would love for you to drop in the chat, who do you think that Chick-fil-A believed their most serious competitor was in the 90s? Okay, we got Wesley says McDonald's. No, they thought McDonald's were amazing. That was good. But Good option. Who else has got one? Who do you think Chick-fil-A thought their most serious competitor was? Church's Chicken, no, but I like some Church's. KFC. All right, Rick may know this one. He probably has been here. Boston Market is the correct answer. So Mrs. Winters, man, is Mrs. Winters even still in business? Where I don't even know where I can find one of those these days. Shelby says the Shelby Association says themselves. Zaxby's wasn't quite there yet. It was Boston Market, and if you actually remember, at the time it was called Boston Chicken. They changed their name to Boston Market, but Chick-fil-A was really concerned about them, and Rick probably knows this story. They've shared it a few places, but Boston Chicken had taken on a ton of capital. They had set a goal to be $1 billion business by the year 2000, and they were putting locations across the country. And this created a little bit of panic at Chick-fil-A's corporate office. Now, y'all, you got to understand at this time, KFC way bigger. Obviously, McDonald's still bigger. All these but they felt like Boston Market did things with excellence, that they had a good product, that they served people well. And so there was a meeting at Chick-fil-A's corporate office with their top leaders and their top consultants where they were going to devise a strategy to expedite their growth. I mean, that was the conversation. How do we grow more quickly? And after they went around the table and shared ideas that included taking on debt, lowering their hiring standards, increasing their suppliers faster than they normally would, Truett Cathy, the late founder of Chick-fil-A, he sat at the head of the table. And if you met him, you would realize that what he did that day was very uncharacteristic. He literally pounded his fist on the table. That was something they weren't accustomed to. And he looked around to his people and he made this statement. And I think this has such great application, not just for business, but for churches and associations. He says, y'all are missing the point. And then he said this, he said, we don't need to worry about getting bigger. We need to get better. And if we get better, our customers will demand that we get bigger. I want to say it again. I think this line is so key. He said, we don't need to worry about getting bigger. We need to worry about getting better. And if we get better, our customers will demand that we get bigger. You probably know this, but I'll just hit you with it. About 5 years later, Boston Market filed for bankruptcy. They've since come out of bankruptcy. Chick-fil-A in the year 2000 hit $1 billion in revenue. The average quick service restaurant does about $1 million a year. The average quick service restaurant, Burger King, Wendy's, those kind. The average McDonald's, kind of the gold standard, does about $3.5 million a year. The average Chick-fil-A is doing more than $8 million a year, and they're doing it in 52 less days a year. Y'all, it wasn't that Chick-fil-A doesn't want to get bigger. They want to get bigger. They just believe the way to get bigger is to get better. You know, I always find when I talk to people, we have a great association here. We are, Noonday has done incredible things and been an amazing resource for our church. And I know when local associations are having conversations about how can we grow, how can we be more valuable to our churches, I think when you focus on getting better, the more that you add value, the more that people are going to come to you and look to you as a resource. So number one, Chick-fil-A, excellence over expedience. Number two, I love this. I have gotten to see a front row seat to this belief that culture is the ultimate competitive advantage. So culture is the ultimate competitive advantage. They just have a belief on this. The program that we got to be involved with this last year, their corporate onboarding, a challenge that Chick-fil-A realized is that they are now in a more hybrid work environment at their corporate office in Atlanta. If you work on their corporate team, you used to come in every day. Now you come into the office about 10 days a month. So you have to be in the office 10 days a month. And the problem is you may come in 10 days and somebody else may come in another 10 days. So you may not overlap with everybody the way that you always did in the past. And so Andrew Cathy, the third generation CEO, challenged his training team. And he said, in the past, our corporate onboarding, when you were hired at corporate, you went through a 3-day onboarding process. He said, we want to take that first from 3 days to 5 days. And then we want to take it from 5 days to 10 days. When somebody gets hired on our team, we want them to have 10 days of immersion into our culture. And here's what he said. I don't want them doing more assessments or more process. I want them to be indoctrinated in our beliefs, in our values, and in our purpose. He has this belief that culture is caught, not taught. And so you've got to experience it. And I love this. Somebody on the team said, 10 days. 10 days we're paying people. Do you realize how expensive of an investment that is? And he looked at him and he said, it's not a big investment if we want somebody to stay here for 30 years. If we want somebody to be here for 30 years, 10 days is a really small investment. And so they're just committed to culture and teaching people their purpose. One of the big underlying pieces of their culture, David Salyers, who's a former marketing executive there, he's also involved with our business here at Addo. They say that great cultures do three things. Great cultures do three things. You can write these down. Number one, they believe the best in each other. Number two, they want the best for each other. And number three, they expect the best from each other. Kim may be capturing these for you, so I'm going to say them one more time. In a great culture, people believe the best in each other. They want the best for each other, and they expect the best from each other. To be a great culture, you have to do all three. The first one is believing the best in. That's about trusting intentions. That's about when somebody frustrates you or they're annoyed or they do something wrong. Do you trust their motives? Do you trust their heart that they are trying to follow Jesus and do what you think they should do? Do you believe the best in? So that's about trusting motives. Number two, want the best for each other. Y'all, can I tell you, I do business world and church world. And unfortunately, I find a lot of times that people in the business world are more willing to want the best for each other than people at churches are. Unfortunately, there's a lot of pastors that hear what's going on down the road and they don't want the best for that other church. They view them as competition. And I think if we're going to be ministry, kingdom minded, we've got to want the best for each other. And then that third thing is key, though. We also have to expect the best from each other. And y'all, our business, Addo, was 2 years in a row. We were number one on the best place to work list in Atlanta, Georgia. Number one on that list. Now, y'all think I'm a brag. I'm about to tell you something I do really wrong. So just hold on for a second. We are number one on the best place to work list. And so we did an assessment among our team, a 360-degree assessment where we would evaluate each other. And y'all, as the founder and leader of the business, I couldn't wait for this. Best place to work. Man, I can't wait to read these assessments of how much these people love me and how great they think I am. And here was what was amazing. We did the 360-degree assessment, which means people on our team evaluated me, and I found out that my team, specifically my high performers, were unbelievably frustrated with me. And the reason I found out why, my high performers were frustrated with me because of my inability or unwillingness to hold the low performers accountable. Here's basically what they said. Kevin, as a leader, is making our life more difficult because he's letting other people get away with things they shouldn't get away with. And I see this all the time in the church world. When we don't expect the best from each other, we believe the best in, we want the best for, but when we have an unwillingness to hold people accountable, we actually don't create great cultures. We create cultures where mediocrity is accepted and rewarded, and eventually our high performers get frustrated and want to leave. So, number one, excellence over expedience. Number two, culture is the ultimate competitive advantage. I want to give you one more, and then I'll stop talking for a minute so we can do some questions. I'll hit you with this one. I think a third one is make decisions right. Make decisions right. A lot of people don't know this gentleman's name, but Jimmy Collins was the president of Chick-fil-A for a number of years. He was the president of Chick-fil-A, the non-family member president, when they hit $1 billion in revenue. And Jimmy said, over the years, I've learned that I may not always make the right decisions, but it's my job to make the decisions right. May not always make the right decisions, but it's my job to make the decisions right. And what he's saying is, yeah, we're going to pray about it. We're going to think about it. We're going to evaluate it. But sometimes we're going to make decisions that may not have been the best, but it's our job to take that and do the best we can with it. And one of the ways that they found helps Chick-fil-A evaluate the right decisions is they would say that the best organizations don't try to manufacture momentum. They find momentum and fuel it. I'm going to say that one again because I think that one's valuable. The greatest organizations don't try to manufacture momentum. They're not just always trying to create it. They find momentum and fuel it. They may have been spending a lot of effort in one area, but they find this other thing over here is actually gaining ground. It's gaining traction. Well, they would reevaluate their focus and say, how do we pour gasoline on the thing that's actually starting to work and having success? And I find that as a leader, sometimes we can get so focused on the area that we're passionate about, the area that we have invested in, that we sometimes put on blinders and we don't want to go to these other areas that are actually seeing success. And I think the true humility in a leader is when you can identify where is the success really happening and how do we go pour gasoline on it. So I'll give you those three. Expedience over excellence. Number 2, culture is the ultimate competitive advantage. And number 3 is making decisions right. I think while those have worked to make Chick-fil-A the company they are today, I think every single one of them apply to our associations and our churches. So I'm going to pause for a minute and we'll take any questions or comments.
One question we had here is when you were talking about the onboarding with Chick-fil-A, what level of employees spend 10 days in training? Are you
So
aware?
that's great. This is their corporate office. So these are the people that are going to serve the field. But I'll tell you a principle they use there, Kim, that I think is really something that association can do. I liked how when Bart was talking about somebody at his association having a staff role at his church and being involved, one thing that I think is key, if you work at the Chick-fil-A corporate office, you go spend 1 to 2 days a year in the restaurant. You got to go fry some chicken and bag some fries and clean some bathrooms and do those things. And I find that sometimes we may have started there, but we get disconnected from there. And I think there is value in staying close to the business. This is another line that Jimmy Collins used to say. He'd say there's only 2 jobs at Chick-fil-A. You either sell chicken or you support someone who does. It's the only 2 jobs. Sell chicken or support someone who does. So if you're not on the front line selling chicken, your job is to support the people that are doing it. This is not a Chick-fil-A example, but this may help. Bernie Marcus, one of the founders of Home Depot, when they were hiring a new CEO named Frank Blake 15, 20 years ago, they were hiring him, and Frank Blake flew to Boca Raton, Florida to spend time with the founder, Bernie Marcus. And Frank Blake asked the founder, what's the most important thing I should know? And here's what the founder said. He said, as CEO of the business, you have a prominent role at Home Depot, but you do not have a significant role. You have a prominent role, but you do not have a significant role. He said the only people that have significant roles are the ones that interact with our customers every day. And I think it's just a good mindset and reminder of what the real focus of the organization should be.
We were fortunate to go to the Chick-fil-A headquarters and tour it down there. And I remember, I don't know if it was the guy you're talking about, but one of the execs back in the day would carry a spoon around and he would go and taste the food at Chick-fil-A because he said We're about selling food. We're about, and it needs to taste good. And so in their corporate office, they have a, a spoon there, and that keeps it before them, is that that's what their main goal is. And so if we don't keep in our forefront that we're here to work with churches and with pastors and people, then we've lost that focus there, and keeping the main thing. And it goes back to, again, to what Bart said about we're the grassroots association is, and we know our churches more intimately than anybody else does, or we should know our churches more intimately than anybody else does. So I think that's a good word. Anybody else got a question before we move on to our next speaker?
A quick question, if I can. So, this is Keith Pierce in Tennessee. Kevin, Georgia's my second favorite team because I was a church planner in Atlanta for 7 years. But the question I got and what you shared was phenomenal. Thank you for that. We know that culture basically eats strategy for lunch, and so we have cultures, especially I'm in a smaller association in East Tennessee. One end of it's Oak Ridge, which is PhDs, the people that made the Manhattan Project, all that. The other end of it's Appalachia. So I deal with a lot of different cultures. And as far as seeing a church culture change, I don't see that happen a lot. I'm wondering if you've got some kind of um, help that you might be able to share with that. And I mentioned the Georgia thing because the only time I've ever seen culture change immediately in my lifetime was when Josh Heupel came to Tennessee, but that's because we were so bad
Yep.
and had so many issues, and he just started throwing points up in the board, and everybody was happy. But in our church environment, what's your suggestions for culture change?
Yeah. It's not easy. I mean, Kim knows we're going through this at our church, and trying to do some of that right now. A church that's runs about 150 to 200 on a Sunday morning. Um, the number one thing that I can say that I've seen Chick-fil-A do that we can apply in there is they are constantly reinforcing purpose, and they tie every activity to purpose. And because of the work that we all do in ministry, a lot of people are familiar with Chick-fil-A, their corporate purpose, which is to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that's entrusted to them and have a positive impact on all they come in contact with. That's true. That is their corporate purpose. But they have a current mission, a current internal rallying cry that is so simple. And their current rallying cry is to be the most caring company in the world. To be the most caring company in the world. That's what they say. And here's what they figured out how to do is to tie every single activity to that overarching outcome. So, Keith, what they would say is, okay, saying my pleasure is a way we show we care, but getting the order right, that's an operational thing. If we really care for people, we'll get their order right. The bathroom needs to be clean because if we really care for people, we'll do that. And so they tie all activities, not just the glamorous or upfront ones. And to me, in a church, to do that well, you've got to determine what that goal is, and then you've got to tie every activity from the person doing the WMU to the Sunday school teacher to the first impressions or greeting team. It's all got to tie back, because if people don't understand how their individual activity ties to the purpose, it's just easy to get muddied and mixed messaging. And by the way, just college football examples, I think Josh did it well at Tennessee. Kirby did it well at Georgia. Nick Saban, I mean, they are obsessive about focus and tying all activities to their overall goals of being the best they can be. So, Keith, thank you. And I appreciate what all of you do. I can just say my experience, our association has been a lifeline to us at our church as we work on trying to fulfill the Great Commission and do what God's called us to do. So I appreciate the work you all do. I know you don't hear it often enough, but thank you for what you do, and thanks for listening today and let me be a part of this.
Thank you,
Hey,
Kevin.
Kevin. Hey, Kevin, before you jump off, I know you're in the midst of church culture change, and church is hard. And I love what Bart said earlier. We really don't have any influence. And what you said just a minute ago, we really don't have any a way to shape church. It's just by being available, caring, and sometimes we care more sometimes than the church cares. But as you've led church in this last season, just seeing incredible change happening at your church, and I know it's going slower than you want because most change always does for leaders. What would you say would help, like as an associational leader, what's one way that associations can continue to push and help churches make those changes that you would just give us?
Yeah, well, I'll give you two that you guys have done. So just Noonday has done for us that I think are valuable. Number one is just having resources that can be there to see it. Like a lot of it really changed for us when Kim came and saw it, because you think you see some of the you think you know some of the challenges, but when you get in there and see the dynamic. So to the extent you have the resources, being closer. And then I also think speaking wisdom, maybe that's to an older pastor who needs to be able to embrace some change, and maybe it's to a younger pastor that needs to have maybe a broader perspective. Daryl, I'll never forget one of the things you told one of my good friends who was our previous pastor, who was leading some change at our church, but at the same time trying to pull back on some of his pastoral responsibilities, or the more shepherding type things. And Daryl, I'll never forget, you said, if you're going to lead change, you got to crank up the care. And so when you're going to change, you need to be doing more of the shepherding ministry type work. And I think, those are examples, but as an associational leader, to the extent you have the relationships, I think you have the influence to speak truth to pastors that they may not hear otherwise. So thank y'all.